and sometimes even more than that, depending on he was working the evening shift or the day shift, the night shift or the day shift. But he was always there. If Donnie got there an hour before work, he was late. That's pretty much the way it was. He was just that faithful to his job. Donnie was also consistent in the way he treated people. You can ask anybody that worked with Donnie, they have utmost respect for him. You can ask any of the inmates at the detention center, and they had utmost respect for Donnie. They had so much respect for him, they gave him a name, Top Cop. That was his name. That's what they knew him by, was Top Cop. And Miss Shirley, I've had several inmates, former inmates, call me, and I've called several and talked to them about Donnie, and every one of them told me to express to you their sorrow for your loss, and they wanted me to tell you that Donnie Johnson was a good man. He was a good man. We all knew that. But Donnie was the most consistent person, I believe, that I've ever encountered, really. I mean, just day in and day out, he was always solid. I'm going to tell you a little story I wasn't going to say because of the time restraint, but I'm going to indulge a little bit. We always went to a warden's conference. I sent the men to a warden's conference every year, and we usually have 8 or 9, sometimes maybe 10 go. And it was in Lafayette at that time, and a lot of the departments, they would always give a per diem to the guys to go and spend, to buy their meals and stuff on. And me, I would always give them a credit card because I didn't want them to have to worry about pinching pennies. Well, this one particular year, I usually go down either 1 or 2 nights and go out with them and go out to supper. And this one night, we got ready to go out, and I said, well, I guess y'all tired of eating seafood, aren't you? Because it was in Lafayette, and they all got real quiet. And I said, y'all didn't go eating seafood? They said, no, we hadn't ate seafood. I said, where y'all been eating at? Where'd y'all eat at? They said, Ruth Chris. I said, Ruth Chris? They said, yeah, and they was quick to say it was Donnie's idea. And come to find out, they had appetizers, had the biggest steak you could buy. I think Donnie probably sampled every dessert that they had on the menu. And when I got the bill, I was floored. I was floored. I really was. But they all put it on Donnie, and Donnie just looked at me and grinned, and he said, you told us you wanted us to eat well. And so that's who Donnie was. He was just a great guy. And it mattered to make a difference what he did. You could never get mad at him because you couldn't help but love him for the person that he was. I really, words cannot adequately express who Donnie really was and the man that he was. I've been praying for your family, and I'll continue to do that. And I know that God has got his hand on Donnie, and Donnie's in a better place where he's at right now. But I've considered honored and privileged to have been able to have known Donnie Johnson and to share part of his life with me and me share part of my life with his. Thank you.
Just a child, I heard the beautiful story, how you love me so, you died on Calvary. Though I claimed you way back then as Lord Almighty, things haven't changed. to feel your touch, your still love, and your still, you're still my Father. You'll always be mine for all the time. You're still Lord. Some have called you Lord, but now they serve another. To worldly things their heart has pledged its loyalty. But as for me, when I made my choice, it was forever. Just as before, and now even more, you're still Lord to me. And you're still Lord. You're still my Father. In little or much, I still feel your touch. You're still Lord, and you're still Lord. You're still my Father. You'll always be mine for all the time. You're still Lord. You'll always be mine for all the time. You're still Lord.
Retired at 24 years of service, served as a captain for many, many years, leading his shift, leading his co-workers. Miss Shirley, this is something kind of private, but I'm going to share it with you. I really don't want many other people to know this. But Donnie Van worked under 3 sheriffs. He told me I was his favorite. So let's keep that between us, just between me and you, okay? During that time of Donnie Van being the captain and leader, he was a mentor. He was a father figure. He was the kind of man that people loved to be around. That's going to be a common theme today, I believe, of this man and how he impacted people. We have a prison that he worked in for many, many years. We have at times 850 offenders in that prison. We're one of the larger prisons in the state of Louisiana. A lot of people don't understand that or even know that. But during that time, all those offenders that come through, all the employees that come through, and it's mentioned today already and in the word that his name was Top Cop. He received the name of Top Cop. Now think about that. Just getting that nickname alone. What's that say about him and how he carried himself on a daily basis? Donnie Van Johnson was a guy that when he showed up to work, everybody knew he was there. The former sheriff, my friend, talked about how early he would get to work. The only time we ever got on to Donnie was about him getting there too early. He was messing up our time sheets. And in our life, I believe, and I believe Donnie understood this way more than most others, we should want to impact people, make an impression on people every day. And he did that. Donnie Van Johnson would totally be able to manipulate a situation in a positive way. We would try to get excited and get frustrated and get things going on, and Donnie Van would always never change. He would never change. Sometimes I'd say, Donnie, let's get excited about this, and he wouldn't get excited about it. He would not get excited. I said, if I get excited, Donnie, I want you to get excited. Some of these guys on this front row have heard that before. Donnie Van wouldn't get excited. But he was always there. We were doing a press conference one day, and we were talking about a crime scene, and Donnie, one of my individuals from another agency, were talking about the crime scene, and he started talking about finger dents, okay, not fingerprints, finger dents. I always thought that was kind of funny, but he was, in his mind, he was imagining what a fingerprint would look like as a finger dent. So throughout Donnie's whole career, and I thought about that, Donnie Van Johnson was putting finger dents in so many people. A lot of these young men right here on the front row here, behind, over here, that he worked with and spent a lot of time with, he put finger dents in them. A lot of those offenders that come through our facility all these years, he put finger dents in those offenders. I can only imagine the things that we don't know of how he impacted people's lives with words, with time, with love, with compassion, all those things that we don't know where those people are, we don't know what they're doing, but I guarantee you, Miss Shirley, that the impact of that has filled Donnie's cup up, overflowed his cup, spread out all over the place. And when I think about Donnie Van Johnson, when I think about Top Cop, that's what I think about. That's why the other day when we got the information, when we got the word of what happened the other morning, the emotion was so strong. Because Donnie Van Johnson had fingerprints in me. He had fingerprints or finger dents in them. And we felt it. We felt that loss. We felt that hurt. We felt that emotion. Donnie Van Johnson wanted to retire after 24 years of service, and I didn't want him to retire, Miss Shirley. I tried to talk him out of it. So I talked him into working part-time for a while. But it was clear what he wanted to do. He said, Sheriff, it's time for me to not miss a thing. The family, the boys, the grandchildren, I heard many stories. He told me, Sheriff, I'm going to work a little part-time, but I'm not going to miss a thing that my family does. If I can make it, I'm going to be there. And that was his priority. And man, I respected that. I respected that. Miss Shirley, Top Cop, he loved his family. He loved his community. He loved this church. He loved the veterans of our community. And he loved the Franklin Parish Sheriff's Office. And we loved him. And what I want to do is, on behalf of this whole office, Sheriff Pilot, myself, these men and women that he's worked with day in and day out, I want to thank you, I want to thank your family for allowing him to be a part of our family, because it was a big deal. and he was a big deal to us. We love him. We loved him. We're going to miss him, but we're not going to forget him. And Donnie Van Johnson is always going to be our top cop. We love you, and thank you for letting us be here.
My Aunt Shirley requested that I say a few words about my Uncle Donnie, and I'm happy to do so. I don't have many memories from my childhood. I have a few, spattering here and there. But of those memories that I do have, Uncle Donnie is in many of them. I remember some of my earliest days growing up on Granddaddy Goodman's farm on New Zion Road. And at that time, Uncle Donnie and Aunt Shirley and Shane and Jason and Justin, they lived just a couple miles down. And some of my earliest childhood memories were spent, we were drinking coffee this morning at the house, talking every night just about it. There was dinner at our house or dinner at Uncle Donnie and Aunt Shirley's. We just did life together. We grew up together. We were always at one another's house. And if we got to go to Uncle Donnie and Aunt Shirley's house, that was a special treat because they had a swimming pool there. And Uncle Donnie taught me how to swim. I remember that. And he was the best swim instructor that anyone could ever have. He had this special, unique technique that was 100% guaranteed to teach you to swim in the most optimal time possible. I never will forget, I probably was 5 or 6, I don't know, where we were out at y'all's house and he come walking by. We were in the pool hanging around, and I was being real careful, and he looked at me, he's like, "Boy, you hadn't learned how to swim yet?" And the next thing I knew, I was flying through the air. And he threw me, not on the side, he threw me in the middle of that swimming pool. And in about 15 seconds, I learned how to swim. He could do it. He taught me work ethic. It's already been said, 2 of his former employers have been up here. But I remember I was at the house whenever he'd wake up to go pull one of those night shifts. And he'd leave about 3 or so in the afternoon. And I'm like, where Uncle Donnie's going? It's like 2-3 hours early. but he's going to work. And just being at the house and watching how he lived his life, he taught me a great work ethic and how to be committed to the things that you need to be committed to. At family gatherings, he was always early. He was always early, everywhere. But he also left early. And so, if you got to the family gathering too late, you'd have missed him. But if you were there and you did catch him, he rarely said goodbye. You'd just look up and he'd be gone. But you knew that he had slipped out, and you'd see him again, rolling back through at some point in time. When I was 9, I experienced a personal tragedy, and my father was diagnosed with cancer, and he fought that for 2 years. And then at 11, he passed. And I remember in that period of time of my life that our family, the extended family, took us on. I mean, we became mutts. His dad would be in the hospital off and on, and, sometimes extended periods of time. We kind of hopped. And one of the blessings that came out of that time for me personally was my uncles. They became more than uncles to me. I'm very sorry. But I cannot not say that he was very special to me. And he became like a father more than an uncle. And he embraced me like a son. And I knew there was always a watchful eye on me. And that could be good or bad, depending on the circumstance. But he watched over me. And he loved me. And as I grew to love him even more, because especially after I left and I'd come home for holidays or visit, I'd always get around him and he'd tell me stories. And I loved to hear him tell stories. But he kept my dad alive to me. And he'd tell me how great friends they were. He'd tell me they weren't just brother-in-laws, we were buddies. We ran the roads, and I'm sure some of those stories were a little bit stretched. But he would tell me how they keep the roads hot. And he'd look at me and tell me, I loved your dad. And my dad loved him. And I loved him for it. There's this weird verse of Scripture in Ecclesiastes that, quite frankly, I don't know how to make much sense out of, but I'm going to try to. It's found in Ecclesiastes 7:1. And the reason why it's hard to make sense of it is because when you read it from our perspective, it doesn't make sense. But Solomon says, a good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume. And we've already heard, and we'll continue to hear, of the reputation that he had. It was impeccable. But he sets that thought in our minds, and then he makes this next statement that's really, really hard for us here today to put our minds and hearts around. He says, the day you die is better than the day you were born. Now, it doesn't make sense to us because we read that from our perspective. But Solomon didn't write that from third person. He wrote that from first person perspective. And what he was trying to tell all of us is when you are born as a child, you're born screaming and kicking, and you're born to uncertainty. And the Scripture tells us that we are born certain to trouble and the burden that life will bring. But if you live your life and have a good reputation, and you live your life honorable and for God, as Uncle Donnie did, that though you were born to uncertainty, you will not die to uncertainty. But you will wake up, as Brother Eric already said, you will fall asleep like Uncle Donnie did. And you will wake up in the arms of God. And that's inside out for us, because I know for you, Aunt Shirley and Shane, Justin, Jason, the last few days have been the most horrific of your life. So it's hard to make sense of it. But for Uncle Donnie, he is at rest. And he is at peace. Because he lived a life that left fingerprints all over all of us. and our lives will never be the same because of what he invested in me and all of us. Thank you for sharing him, and I love you very much.
The touch of hands so kind and tender, they're leading me in paths that I must trod. I'll have no fear when Jesus walks beside me, for I'm sheltered in the arms of God. So let the storms rage high, the dark clouds rise, they won't worry me, for I'm sheltered safe within the arms of God. He walks with me, and no hurt shall harm me. For I'm sheltered in the arms of God. Soon I shall hear the call from heaven's portal. Come home, my child, it's the last mile you must trod. I'll fall asleep, and wake in God's new heaven, sheltered safe within the arms of God. So let the storms rage high, the dark clouds rise, they don't worry me, for I'm sheltered safe within the arms of God. He walks with me, and no hurt shall harm me. For I'm sheltered in the arms of God. So let the storms rage high, the dark clouds rise, they don't worry me, for I'm sheltered safe within the arms of God. He walks with me, love, and no hurt shall harm me. For I'm sheltered in the arms of God. For I'm sheltered in the arms of God.
Well, that's a whole nother kind of nervous when you get up here. I'm going to miss my grandpa so much, but deep down I know he's in a much better place than all of us. And there's so much you could say about such a great man, but I got a little bit wrote. I won't be no more than 2 minutes. There's approximately 171,476 words we use in the English language, but there are no words good enough to accurately describe a man this great. If I could think of some that would be the closest to describe him, I could think of strong, loving, independent, determined, and reliable. A little bit nosy and hardworking. One of the things that my grandpa taught me was that if somebody can't do something, you call a Johnson to get it done. This is a man that did whatever it took to put food on the table, did whatever it took to pay the bills, to take care of his kids. At times, worked 3 jobs. That's a lot. I was blessed enough to get to live with Nana and Pop for about a year. And in that time, my relationship with him grew from a grandpa and a grandson to something so much more, something I never would have imagined it could have been. It grew to a dad and a son, or a best friend. And he was just so good. You could always count on him. Growing up, me and Easton would always pick with him and say, Kylie's the favorite. All the time, we'd always pick. She was. We all knew it, but we had to give him a hard time, and he would always act like, no, she ain't. But then you could almost kind of tell he would look at her just like, yeah. She knew she was, but when you got alone with him, he had a way of making you feel as you was the only one. He didn't have no others. You was the only one. And it was, with him, it was nothing to get a call from him every 2 to 3 days, or even every day. And it was just ask, what's going on? What's going on in your life? What's new? And he was the type of person you never wondered if he cared, because he was going to let you know. And he was the type of person that wanted to know everything you had going on in your life. Doesn't matter if you thought it was boring or if you thought it was insignificant. He thought it was significant, and if he could be there, he was there. It didn't matter if he had to drive 5 hours, 10 hours to Ohio. It didn't matter. He was there. And if you had something going on, he wouldn't say, that's not the way to do it, or you're doing it wrong. He'd say, well, this is the way I would do it. He'd make you feel good about it. This is a man that touched so many people, and there will never be another like him. And I know sometime next week I'll find myself sitting at the house just wishing and hoping I could hear that phone ring one more time. And but I know he's in a better place than us. And it gives us comfort knowing that we all know where he's at. It gives us comfort knowing that he's looking down on me and my family, just smiling.
Well, be thankful he didn't ask every family member, because there's a bunch of us. I'm another one of the nephews, and one thing I'm thankful for about Uncle Donnie is he gave me one of my best friends. And, you know, there's a lot of debate in today's society about what a true man is, and I'm sure if you were to ask many different people, they would give you many different descriptions, but Donnie Van Johnson was a man. He was rough and tough and hard-nosed and stubborn, and he was sweet and kind and the most tender-hearted person that you could ever meet. And I thought about how to make this statement, and I'm going to try to make it in the best Uncle Donnie way that I can, and you've probably heard this. He was the type of guy that would black your eye, skull drag you across the parking lot, and then hug you and give you the shirt off his back. And that's the kind of man he was. And As I was flying down thinking about what to say, my mind went to actually a Martin Luther King Jr. speech that he gave, and I think it's very fitting, so I wanted to share a part of it with you. If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Prince sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of a hill, be a shrub in the valley. Be the best little shrub on the side of a hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best at whatever you are. Donnie Van Johnson was the best. As a Christian, he taught us how to love the Lord with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. As a husband, how to be committed. As an uncle and as papa, how to love your family. As a military man, how to selflessly serve your country. And as a law enforcement, how to be top cop. But I think probably the best way to summarize who he was is found in Colossians chapter 3 in 2 verses of Scripture. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. In all that he did for all of us, it is clear to me that as much as he loved us, he did it because he was serving the Lord. He's left for us today a fine example of how to be a spouse, a father, an uncle, a grandpa, and a Christian. And we would do well to all be the best at serving the Lord, because in doing so, we're able to serve others. I love you, Aunt Shirley. He was top cop, but you top mama. Anybody that could put up with that for so many years, you need a plaque yourself. I love you.
Somebody here needs an answer to the questions, the fears, and the whys. Somebody here is desperate for freedom from the past, the chains, and the lies. Feel like you've wasted so much time. You want to move ahead, but you're still last in line. Feel like you're running will never end, and you will never win. But I don't know who told you you would not make it, and I don't know who told you you could not take it. I don't know who told you it's time that you quit, but my God says wait, it ain't over yet. Somebody here needs an answer to the questions, the fears, and the whys. Somebody here is desperate for freedom from the past, the chains, and the lies. like you've wasted so much time. You want to move ahead, but you're still last in line. Feel like your running will never end, and you will never win. But I don't know who told you you would not make it, and I don't know who told you you could not take it. I don't know who told you it's time that you quit. But my God says, wait, it ain't over yet. It ain't over till I say it's over, and I say that this thing, it ain't over yet. It ain't over till I say it's over, and I say that this thing, it ain't over yet. It ain't over till I say it's over, and I say that this thing, it ain't over yet. It ain't over till I say it's over, and I say that this thing, it ain't over yet. Somebody here, you need an answer. Somebody here is wanting to give up. Somebody here, you've been ready to quit. But my God says, wait, hold on, because this thing ain't over yet.
Well, do my best to get through this. So on behalf of our family, I just want to say thank you. I know y'all already been thanked, but thanks for all the phone calls and text messages and emails and cakes and pies and soups and hugs and tears and memories. I told someone not long ago that, I probably really didn't know my dad. You grow up with somebody in their house, and it's the old saying, you don't see the forest for the trees. And I never really knew what type of man he was in the community until probably 4 or 5 years ago. I came down, I had a boat trailer with a flat, and he said, well, let's take it and get it fixed. So we go to the tire place, and man, the guy there was just Donnie, like your dad. And then we stop at the auto parts place, and it's the same thing. And the next store, we made 3 or 4 stops that day, and just it hit me, what kind of man he really was. And I had a whole nother level of appreciation for him. And then through this last week, just the stories that I've heard and the people that I didn't know he knew and I didn't know he impacted, it's comforting. And it's those memories that will get my mom and my family through, the time that's ahead. So if you talk to Donnie Van on the phone much, you know that he would always say, yep, that's right. That's what he said. So if I say something that strikes a nerve with you, I don't want to hear amen or yeah, just yep. All right, because I need a little encouragement to get through this. Donnie Van, DV, top cop. He was my dad. He was my hero. He was a man's man. I read a text message from Gene Moore this week, and it summed it up, and it said he was the best of what all men should be. There's a poem that's entitled The Indispensable Man, and basically a synopsis of it is, if you didn't know, my dad loved poetry, which just is astounding. But the synopsis of it was, if you take your hand and you put it in a bucket of water, no matter how much you splash that around, when you take your hand out, that hole is instantly filled. And when you're gone, that's how much you'll be missed. No man is indispensable. but he didn't know my daddy. He didn't know my daddy. My daddy loved, and I probably could have just took my notes and threw them away after the people that spoken before, but my dad loved fiercely. He served faithfully, and he lived consistently. The last text message thread between my dad and my Uncle Shelby and myself, we were making a joke. He had gone to Arkansas, and he was supposed to come home on Tuesday. And Uncle Shelby called, and he goes, "How much money you got on what day he comes home?" Because we knew it wasn't going to be Tuesday afternoon. And Uncle Shelby missed it by 5 minutes on Monday. But we were laughing and joking, and Dad's like, "You know, y'all ought to leave me alone." And I said, "You know, you're just too or I could say you're predictable, but consistency sounds so much better." And Uncle Shelby said, "I'm with you." And then here we are, you know, a week later, never knowing how much that text would actually mean. He loved fiercely. DV loved my mom fiercely through dating, through breakup, and 48 years of marriage. And in case you don't know, my daddy is in an airport going off to Vietnam to fight and serve our country and preserve our freedoms and liberty, and my mama dumps him over the telephone. And he vowed a vow that he would never speak to her again. And he's in Vietnam, halfway across the world, and he writes a letter, my mom to my grandpa and my grandmother. And my grandpa was on a riverboat working. At that time, he could take his spouse with him, and they were on a riverboat. And he wrote a letter, and he addressed it to the Welches in Winsboro, Louisiana, 71295. And it showed up in the right mailbox. And since they were gone, she responded. And the rest is just a love story. So you've heard that they were married in 1972, but what you probably haven't heard is I wasn't born until 79, and I've heard that those first 7 years were rough years until I showed up and made everything all better. I've never heard them argue. I've never heard them raise their voice, and I've told people that throughout the years that, you know, I don't relate with spouses fighting. I just don't know how to do it because I never had the example of how to do it. And at one point, early on in their marriage, Mom and I were talking the other day, and at one point early on in their marriage, she was giving him up the country for something, and he just sat there looking at her. And she's like, "Why won't you say anything?" And he said, "It takes two to argue, and I don't want to argue with you." And that's just the way he was. And from that point, that's how the arguments were settled. DV loved his three boys fiercely. And if you know us all three, you know that we are all three extremely different. We are all three very different. And he loved us for that, not in spite of it. He loved us for our differences. When it came to us, we were raised very biblically. Paraphrased, Proverbs 3:12 says, if a father loves you, he's going to correct you. And he believed wholeheartedly in Proverbs 23:13, which says, withhold not correction, and if you beat him with the rod, he shall not die. So he would always tell us, this ain't going to kill you. Later in life, that changed from whippings to, well, son. And I knew when I heard those words that I needed to lean in real close because there was going to be a gentle nudge in the right direction. DV loved his work and church family fiercely. There's probably not one of you young men from the church or from work, and probably even a few of the girls, that he hadn't promised a pistol whip or skull drag. He would always say, old men don't fight fair. There's also not one of you that he wouldn't cancel plans and drop everything and show up on time where you needed him to do whatever you needed him with a smile on his face. I can't tell you how many times this week I've heard Donnie Van loved them or they loved Donnie Van. Those that knew him loved him, period. And if for some reason, some slim chance he didn't like you, you never knew it. Because he's going to treat you just like he treats everyone else. Donnie Van served faithfully. He served his family faithfully. He worked 2 and 3 jobs to raise us boys and to provide for Mama. He protected us. He mowed yards. He moved some of us a lot. And he helped raise our kids. DV served work faithfully. You've already heard. And it's no lie. He's not exaggerating. That man showed up to work 2 hours early. And I'm like, what are you doing, Dad? He said, well, I can get all this done before my guys get there and they won't have to do it. And I'm like, well, that's why you have them working for you. What are we paying them for? But he was going to be there and things were going to be taken care of. He always taught me to do more than what you're paid to do. Make sure you're indispensable. Make sure that if they replace you, that you are missed. And it's not the same. I've seen him work young men down in the dirt till their tongues were dragging. I've seen him turn down significant promotions and recommend men that are less qualified than him for the job and turn around and serve those men faithfully with no questions asked. And somehow he would still manage to lead. DV was no carpenter. If you've ever seen his chicken pen that he attempted to put together, you would know he is no carpenter. He couldn't read a tape, cut a board straight, but DV built bridges wherever he went for young men behind him to use. He served his church faithfully. He worked in security and lawn maintenance. Top cop was on the job. You never have to worry about that. I was on the phone with him one Sunday as he was pulling out of the parking lot. And I'm in the middle of a sentence, and he said, that's so embarrassing. And I said, what? And I hear the door open, I hear the ding, and then he gets back in, he closes the door. And he said, I missed a piece of trash that was in the ditch before service started. And it was embarrassing to him that people drove in and they saw that. Brother Mark, you're going to be 1 gun short for service now. Or 2 guns, or 3, depending on how many he's carrying. And a can of mace, and a pocket knife. The man was armed to the teeth because old men don't fight fair. Donnie Van lived consistently. You've heard that. He lived consistently at work and he lived consistently at church, but I'm here to tell you he lived consistently at home. And that's a big difference. My daddy walked the talk. His actions are his legacy. He didn't make us boys or an employee do anything he hadn't done before and that he hadn't done it with excellence. You never had to wonder if he was going to be at work. You never had to wonder if he was coming home to his family. We never had to wonder if he'd be there for good moments and for the tough times. I never had to wonder if he was thinking about me. Kylie was the favorite. I was the favorite son. No secret about it. I was the favorite son. I was his first call of the day. If I hadn't already called him first, I was his first call of the day. And I can probably count on one hand the times that we didn't talk 2, 3, 4, even 5 times a day. A lot of times I was his last call of the day. If he knew I was hunting, he never failed to call me during prime time. I'd call him back after dark and ask him why he called me well, I didn't want you to wonder if I was thinking about you. I remember one time Mom told the story that this was before cell phones, and if my mom had gone somewhere, my daddy was going to call her. And he wasn't checking to see where she was at, but he was going to call her. My mom was fussing about it, and evilly, his mom said, well, Shirley, you never have to wonder if he's worried about you or he's thinking about you. And there's lots of men that aren't like that. My daddy didn't go anywhere that he couldn't be early. And if he was going to be late, he just didn't go. His favorite saying was, if you're on time, you're late. But on the flip side of that, Daddy was known for leaving early. He'd say, I don't want to overstay my welcome. He was notorious for leaving social settings without a goodbye. And now, in true DV fashion, he's done it in death. Edna St. Vincent Millay dirge without music, says, I'm not resigned to the shutting away of loving hearts in the hard ground. So it is, and so it will be, for so it has been, time out of mind. Into the darkness they go, the wise and the lovely. Crowned with lilies and with laurel they go, but I am not resigned. Lovers and thinkers, into the earth with you. Be one with the dull, the indiscriminate dust. A fragment of what you felt, what you knew, a formula, a phrase remains, but the best is lost. The answers quick and keen, the honest look, the laughter, the love, they are gone. They're gone to feed the roses, elegant and curled as the blossom, fragrant as the blossom, I know, but I do not approve. More precious was the light in your eyes than all the roses in the world. Down, down, down into the darkness of the grave, gently they go, the beautiful, the tender, the kind. Quietly they go, the intelligent, the witty, the brave. I know, but I do not approve, and I am not resigned. So where do we go from here? Young men, Cam, Justin, Josh, Connor, he loved you, buddy. Grandsons, this man built you a bridge. Use it. The best way to honor him is to live out the example he laid and walk in the footprints he left you. Family, where do we go from here? We're broken. A piece of me is lost. I'm lost. But all I know to do is what you've shown me. Be fierce, be faithful, and be consistent.
Why don't we stand here this afternoon? You've been sitting a while. I could say ditto to everything that's been said, and I could dismiss you, and it'd have been a wonderful tribute to a wonderful man. But I'm not going to do that. I just want you to stand, because some of you need to stand. Some of your old knees need to stand up, flex a little bit. Look at your neighbor and say, this was a great man. God bless you. You may be seated. Walked in a restaurant about lunch today, and somebody looked at me and said, you have a funeral. You're fixing to head to a funeral, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. And they said, Donnie Van Johnson was a great man. And I said, you know why he was great? You know where he found his greatness? In the fact that he didn't realize he was great. He didn't try to be great. The aliases that's been used here this afternoon, he has so many: Donnie, Donnie Van, DV, Dad, Papa, Top Cop. But you always knew who they were talking about. And we were all shocked, saddened. Of course, you know, Tuesday morning, it's already been mentioned, the news that we received on Tuesday morning, it shocked all of us. And this was one of those stops, unscheduled stop on the highway of life that none of us had planned. You know, the curtain of honesty opens every once in a while in the scripture, and I was reading in Jeremiah this past week, and this saddened soul of a servant, Barak, who's speaking to his protege, Jeremiah, who we call the weeping prophet or the Prozac prophet, because he's so sad. And Barak seems to take over his wording, and in 45:3 of Jeremiah, he says, thou didst say, woe is me now, for the Lord hath added grief to my sorrow. I fainted in my sighing, and I find no rest. The Message says, you say these are bad times for me. It's one thing after another. God is piling on the pain. I'm worn out, and there's no end in sight. The New Living said, you have said I'm overwhelmed with trouble. Haven't I had enough pain already? And now the Lord has added more. I'm worn out from sighing, and I can't find rest. I think most of us probably, after Tuesday morning receiving this phone call, that's kind of some of the words we had to say. God, you seem to be piling this on. How much more can we take? This Johnson family that suffered the loss of 4 siblings in the last 5 months. We've met here all too many times, too often, in these last few months. Words seem so woefully inadequate to express our emotions, and these that have preceded me this afternoon have done a tremendous job in expressing the love and care and the concern and the greatness of our friend, Brother Donnie Johnson. Paul was writing in 1 Thessalonians 4, he said, I wouldn't have you to be ignorant concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. He didn't say you don't sorrow, you just don't sorrow as others that have no hope. We have a hope this afternoon, and we're sorrowful, we're hurting, this is painful. This is not something we wanted to go through. We didn't want to feel this. But thanks be to God that we don't sorrow as those who have no hope. We have a hope. Shirley, Shane, Justin, Jason, this family that this man loves so much, his sons, his grandkids. We've all heard the stories, his brothers, his sisters. I've often told people the Johnsons are like the Sacketts. If you know Louis L'Amour, the Johnson family were like the Sackett family. They would come to each other's rescue. But they're such a vital part and have been such a vital part of this church for many, many years. And to our pastors and our ministers here, matter of fact, I'll tell you what I'd like for you to do. If you're a pastor or minister here, if you're involved in ministry, would you stand? I want this family to see how well represented the ministry is here today. Look at this family. Show our ministers some appreciation this afternoon. And so I thought that, there has to be a scripture text or a poet or a philosopher, and we've heard all quoted this afternoon. Has to be a writer that could best encapsulate this moment in our lives. We've heard Socrates and all of these quoted. And so the only one I could come up with was Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh said, how lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. You see, our broken hearts this afternoon are the price that we pay for love that we felt. The tears are our own personal paradox. It's the pain of the present that mingles with the precious past and our memories. The heart can't contain the emotions, and so by divine design, God put in us these tear ducts that give path to express our love. And tears are just a simple way of our divine Creator showing us this is love that you can't contain, and words it can't express the sorrow and the pain that you feel. And so we have tears by divine design. 1 Samuel 20 and verse 18 says, thou shalt be missed because thy seat will be empty. It was between two precious friends, two friends that loved one another greatly. Brother Shelby, he texted me this morning, early this morning. This remarkable friendship between David and Jonathan, that despite their age difference, Jonathan was quite a bit older than David, they had developed this friendship, these two courageous men, Jonathan and David. And they were so filled with emotion and great passion and loyalty to one another and a great love for one another. And Jonathan says to David on this day of departing, we're going to miss you because your seat is going to be empty. Someone said about the bucket that you put in and you pull out your hand, that's not really true. Because Donnie Van Johnson is gone, and it leaves a void. It leaves a hole in the water when a man of that magnitude leaves. It preaches a sermon, that empty seat. It preaches a sermon about his loyalty, about his commitment, about his responsibility, about his work ethic. You've heard all of these things this afternoon. And as pastors, and we've heard of voices from the home, the family, the employers. I want to tell you from the pulpit this afternoon, churches miss these kind of men when they're gone. These are not easy voids to fill. We already miss his faithful dedication to his family, his faith, and these facilities. Donnie Johnson was not some fly-by-night shallow showboat. Matter of fact, he didn't like showboating. He wasn't impressed by a lot of fluff and no stuff type people. He was solid, settled, salt of the earth type man. He exemplified excellence in his character, his conscientious consistency. Nobody knew what each other was going to say, but that's a word that I found. It seems like it was just in every person that stepped in this pulpit, his consistency. Whether it was mowing the grass, whether it was being the security team leader, whatever it was, he gave it everything he had. He leaves us that lasting legacy of loyalty and love. You know, they tell us a person that loses a limb, it's called the phantom limb syndrome. It's the feeling of having those sensations even though that limb has been removed from the body. They'll still have and be aware of feelings even though that limb is not attached to the body. It's because they tell us the brain continues to get messages from nerve endings that used to feel that missing limb. We're already feeling the pain of Donnie being gone and missing this afternoon. You see, men like this build churches like this. You know, I heard it said many years ago, what kind of church would this church be if all of its members were just like me? I'd love to have a church full of Donnie Johnsons. Somebody said, well, he gets here early, and if he's here an hour early, he was late. We had a baptism a few Sundays ago, and I was going to be tied up, not be able to be here until about an hour before service. But I knew someone that I could call that would be here, because these are the type of men you can build a church on. I always go back through my text, times like this, to look at some of the last text. And one of the last texts was Donnie was out of town. He had missed a service. Brother Dillon, it just so happened he missed the service that our Christmas for Christ offering was received. He watched the service, but he wasn't here. And one of his last texts, he texted and wanted to know if it would be too late when he got back into town to give his offering to Christmas for Christ. That tells you everything you need to know about a man right there. He was a giver. Now, also when I was going back through my text, he wasn't above picking or pranking or, he had that mischievous gleam in his eye every once in a while, and you knew something was coming. He could set you up real well. But I was looking back through some of my text, and Steve, he knew how much I like to eat, and I had already heard that Lafayette story. He told me with glee about using that credit card. He liked that. But when I look back through some of my text just recently, there's one of our favorite restaurants, and he had sent me a picture. When they got their food, he told everybody at the table to get a big fork or spoonful of food and get it close to their mouth, because he was going to send a picture to Brother Mark. He wasn't above picking and pranking, doing those things. Shakespeare said, "Consistency, thou art a jewel." I'm amazed at how many times that word has been used this afternoon in relation to Donnie Johnson. It's a word that's not even in the Bible, but the principle of consistency is there. Of course, Jesus is a personification of consistency. Hebrews 13:8 says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I could tell you Donnie Van Johnson was the same yesterday, today, and forever. Wherever you saw him, whenever you saw him, he was the same. Hebrews 10:23 says, "Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering." This was a man that didn't waver in his life. We understand here this afternoon that we're eternal. This is not temporal. We're eternal. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. I used to say that everybody has a soul. Now I just say that every soul has a body. We're just transporting our spirits and our souls through this thing we call life. It's already been mentioned how Donnie proudly served his country he loved so greatly in Vietnam. I can tell you with a great degree of certainty there was no flag burning going on around Donnie Johnson. Now we talk about how kind and easygoing and all of these characteristics he had, and he did. But there was another side. There was no flag burning going on around this Army man. And I tell you today, we should shamelessly salute the valor and the courage of these great men and women who fought for the freedoms that we enjoy today, that allow us to stand here. They risk life and limb, and they brave the elements and the enemy on a foreign field for us to enjoy the freedoms that we have today. Thank God for men like Donnie Johnson. Thank God. So I tell this family and I tell this church, he mattered to this church because this church mattered to him. He leaves this place a better place. He taught us how to die because he taught us how to live. There's an Irish proverb that says, death leaves a heartache no man can heal. Love leaves a memory that no one can steal. You see, he taught us that life doesn't consist in what a man has, but what a man is. Tuesday morning, when we received the news, it's like a book that's half read. It's like a game that ends at halftime when it ends so sudden. But you see, what's going to make this life memorable will not be the etching on a grave marker in a cemetery somewhere, but it's going to be the etching on our hearts that he leaves. I didn't know. There's some things pastors find out at funeral services. I didn't know about this precious man being dumped on the way to Vietnam. I had no idea. Maybe we need to have more marriage seminars or something like that. I don't know. I didn't know he liked poetry. I had no idea. But it's ironic that you mentioned that, because I was looking back, as I look back through those texts, just a short time ago. This was random, totally random. He has never sent me a poem, never. And just a short time ago, I can't remember the date, but it was just shortly ago, he sent me a poem. And I thought it strange that day, but I don't see it as being strange now. The poem was a legacy. The steps I take upon the sod are easier than those my grandpa trod. The strong foundation grandpa laid supports the progress I have made. He blazed a trail, I follow along. I profit from what he did wrong. I build upon what he did for me. His mark remains on all I see. All his efforts, the things he tried, they lived on when grandpa died. I pray the tracks that I leave might be a help to those who follow me. What a legacy he leaves. Donnie Johnson, a life well run, an eternal crown well won. Think of going to sleep here and waking up there. Think of going to sleep in this world and waking up in that world. Think of going to sleep in Franklin Parish and waking up in heaven. I'm a little envious of my friend this afternoon. He made it a little earlier than we're going to make it. And he'll be waiting. You see, death is not the end of the road, it's just a bend in the road. Think of that reunion that's happening now in the glory world. His mother, Eva Lee, Truman, Lamar, JT, Jody, what a time is being had. Paul said to be absent here is to be present there. What a reunion. Revelation 21:4 And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. For the former things are passed away. To this precious family, Shirley, Shane, Justin, Jason, to these siblings, Shelby, Liz, Kenny, Faye, we're praying for you. We love you. We're going to miss him. We're here for you. We're praying for you. We love you so much, and we'll miss him so much. Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you today that we're able to share this walk and journey of life with a man of the caliber of Donnie Johnson. God, I thank you for allowing us to be here this afternoon to celebrate his life. You promised you'd be a present help in a time of trouble, and our hearts are troubled today. Let your strength undergird this family and these friends. You promised a peace that passes all understanding. And as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we don't have to fear because we know that you're here with us. Bless this family and these friends in the days ahead with your presence and with your power. For it's all in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. At this time, we're going to turn the remainder of the service to those that would do a flag presentation. May God bless you.
Some of you don't know me. Thank goodness. I'm long-winded. Just want to warn you. But I wrote down what I got, brother. And I was sitting here thinking there's no certain way to do this, but I'm going to do two things today because I felt like I owe it to my comrade. Somebody told me a few years ago, to the best of my knowledge, Brother Hawthorne, there's 24 to 28 men that left this church to Vietnam. And all of them served and came home. Because I feel, because of the prayers strictly, not just from here, but from our country. And today, don't none of you take it for granted. So I have so many other veterans out here that could do a 10 times better job than I could do. But there wasn't any of them a closer friend to him, to me, than this. And also, I'm part of the family because if it wasn't for Shirley's mama, me and my wife probably wouldn't be even married. And I didn't know that you broke up with him either. Okay? Till today. Thank you, brother. Okay? It will help me very much. And I want to tell this whole church, Donnie Johnson prepared as best as he could that his wife will be taken care of. Not only him, but his family, his brothers, his sisters, but his first love was God. His next love was Shirley Welch, and we saw it the whole time, okay? But I just want to read something that I felt like, there's two parts of this service for me to do this afternoon. First of all, in case I wasn't planning on doing this, because I really believe, and I'm going to pray, that they have full military honors. It's already been approved and everything, depending on the weather and what happens for the family and the close ones, Monday or when he's dead. And Donnie Van Johnson, I told him full military honors. Full military honors couldn't be better done for any person than this guy sitting right here, period. So I got the phone call about Donnie passing away. Of all things, I was sitting at the VA cemetery in Rayville, Louisiana. And Brother Ron Cherrier called me and told me about it. And I remember when we took care, me and Donnie, we took care of where he was and Shirley will be buried. There wasn't a better servant of this country than the man that's laying in his casket, bar none. And there's no certain way to do it here because they're going to do it military-wise. And Keith, you know what I'm talking about. It's protocol. There's certain things that's done. But we're in a civilian environment. We're in a church that meant more to him than any kind of military service ever would mean. And I want to do this the best that I can. But the first thing, y'all, all you orators that was up here before me, God gave me something this morning in my office that I think Donnie would want me to read because it kind of sums up, just sums up all the things that's been said about him. We could stay here for 3 hours and talk, and everybody out here could stand up and tell you what Donnie meant to them. But I wrote this down this morning, and it's not my original writings for myself, but I do know God gave it to me. It says, God loves to use people others might overlook. The Apostle Andrew is not as well known as his brother Peter, but the Bible recounts that the first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon Peter, and tell him, we have found the Messiah. And he brought him to Jesus, and that's John 1:41-42. Peter met Jesus through Andrew. When Andrew, one of John the Baptist's disciples, learned about Jesus from John, he followed Jesus and believed, and immediately told his brother. Andrew's quiet faithfulness had an impact that would shake the world. God values faithful service over fame. He can use us powerfully wherever we are, even when no one is looking. And I think Donnie Van Johnson did that. He didn't care. He didn't want to be seen. You mentioned the thing that was brought up here 2 or 3 times about he took over the security team here, Brother Powell. But do you know what came with the security team? Taking the garbage out, which is just as important, or probably more important than a security team. And I count it a blessing. When I went to Vietnam, and I knew there was an older brother of Donnie Van that prayed for me, and I know he did, not because he told me he did, I could feel it. And I did not know that much about Donnie, really I knew he went to Vietnam, didn't know anything too much about it, what his service was. But I'm going to explain something to here in a little while for you 2 sheriffs over here, because y'all inherited Donnie Johnson. But the thing about it is, one thing that Donnie Johnson loved and loved and loved was military. He loved it. And y'all all know he did. But today we're going to do something that I've never done. I've done a lot of presentations, but today is so unique because God impressed me that Eason Johnson, Donnie Van Johnson's grandson, is going to have the privilege and the honor of presenting his grandfather's flag to his grandmother. I'm going to ask all of the veterans, active military people, sheriff's department, anyone that has anything to do with protection of our land. It may be your job, or it may have been your job at one time. I'm going to ask you if you would, and once he gets through, I have another message from Donnie before we do the end of the service. And Eason, if you would, all of you, I would ask all of y'all to please stand if you fall in that category that I just done. And if anybody else feels led to stand, you're more than welcome to. But Eason, next week, I'm gonna let you do the whole, I'm gonna let you take it and stand in front of your grandmother, because I just want to say one word, brother. From a grandson who is a member of the military right now, I did a lot of stuff with Donnie Van the last few years with security duty, other things. And Eason, I know more about your military service than you will ever know I know. Because it was long, long discussions that he kept me on. Because this is his grandson, and he's not, it's not, I ain't gonna say it's his favorite grandson, but it's his grandson that's serving in the military, I can promise you that. And that meant so much to Donnie Van. And I think even right now, he's looking down on this and saying, well done, Eason. Well done, Eason. And at this time, I would ask you to present the flag to your grandmother. And thank you, Brother Donnie, for allowing me to do this. Now, to get back to what, y'all may be seated just a minute. This will not take very long. The reason, Kevin, that y'all got this young man, I pulled out his DD-214 before it came over here. I just can't imagine Donnie Van Johnson's MOS, or his job title in the military, was 95B2 Papa, okay? Which means simply military policeman. Okay, y'all probably knew that. Okay, but we're out here in a congregation that some of them know military. Everybody here has probably got someone akin to you or attached to you. Donnie Van Johnson here, it says, the reason they got that flag, it says right here, the first thing, it says date inducted. You know what inducted means? You got drafted, okay? But you know what? I can tell you one thing, back in them days, say what you want to, Donnie Van Johnson was just faithful to get inducted as he was. And, you know, he could have made a great career in the military, no doubt about it. And he was inducted April of 1971, okay? Well, I look down here. In September, he was over in Vietnam, okay? And he spent some over there to June 8th of June, 1972. Now, here was the funny thing about this. Donnie Van could have probably made a few comments over and stayed. He could have stayed in Vietnam because they would have let him out early from Vietnam, 6 months early even. But I think after hearing this story today, and I may be totally wrong, Shirley, I may be totally wrong, but his last duty assignment when he came back home was Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Now, I have a thing to tell you, Shirley. I'm wondering if Donnie Van, when he came home, what happened when he came home from Vietnam, Sister Shirley? He got married, didn't he? Did you go to Fort Bragg with him? You did. Well, I'm wondering if Donnie was tossing and turning, should he get married or go to Fort Bragg? Okay? So he put you was inducted. He inducted you, didn't he? Okay? And the funny thing about that is, you would have served with him in the military. I've got a little wife that's beyond belief that served 26 years with me. She did the serving. I was getting paid to do it. She did the serving, and I want to thank you because you got that letter. Because he was sitting in Vietnam wondering, what am I going to do when I get home? And then on top of that, the very first thing, me and Donnie Van talked about this before, after he got out of service, y'all got him, okay? You got the best that they had. But the funny thing about Donnie Van was, he told me, he said, Jerry, I've tossed between two or three things. He didn't tell me he was going to stay in the military, but he did say, My Bible says to always go back to your first love. And Brother Mark, this was his first love. We're standing in his first love right now. His first love, he proved it was God, without a shadow of a doubt. And I'm going to read something here real quick, because the last thing is, we always take this. Now, the funny thing about it is, people got up here and said, I got a few minutes and everything. And one of the most important things to Donnie's life we're fixing to do. And it's going to be the end of this service. But I want to read a little something to you right here, because a lot of people don't understand. We're fixing to play taps, okay? And all of you know, I'm going to just read it because I don't want to prolong this. It says taps is a trumpet call played by the U.S. military at the end of the day as well as at funerals. If you read the unofficial lyrics, the words of taps, you will discover that many of the verses end with the phrase, God is nigh, or God is near. Whether before the dark of each night settles, or while mourning the loss of a loved one, the lyrics offer soldiers the beautiful assurance that God is near. In the Old Testament, trumpets were also a reminder of the Israelites that God was near. In the middle of celebrating the feast and festivals that were part of the covenant agreement between God and the nation of Israel, the Jews were to sound the trumpets. That's in Numbers 10 and 10. Blowing the trumpet was a reminder not only of God's presence, but also that he was available when they needed him most. And he longed to be with them. Today, we still need reminders that God is near. In our own style of worship, we too can call out to God in prayer and song. Perhaps our prayers can be thought of as trumpets, asking God to help us. The beautiful encouragement is that God always hears those calls. 1 Peter 3 and 12. To each of our pleas, he responds with the assurance of his presence that strengthens and comforts us in the difficulties and sorrows of life. So as you listen to the tribute of this fallen soldier, you just realize it's not only a tribute just to Donnie Johnson, and I think Donnie would want you to know it's a tribute to his family, it's a tribute to this nation, and it's a tribute to everyone that attended this service today. Now I'm going to ask all of you that can, if you would you please stand? And at this time, I hope he can hear me. That's supposed to be doing this for us. And I apologize for the last word on this screen, but I know none of you in here took it for what it was. I didn't know how to get it off of there. Landon, you did an excellent job, and I appreciate it, brother. Now, at this time, if all of you would please take your seats. I'm going to turn it back over to. Okay.